Every verse is different.
I keep thinking of these older women I see and I'm telling a story about it or something, and I'm thinking, I have to realize I'm in that group.
What group?
The old lady group.
Don't act like it, man.
Older friend, just older.
Season.
A fine vintage.
Seasoned.
I like that. Women of a certain vintage.
That's great. Use the chef words.
They're all just fine. Oh, I guess I gotta talk about the, I gotta go give Jim a hug. You're not starting yet, are they?
It's that. It's that. Zosa. That's the red one.
Good morning. I'm Fran Forsberg, and I am with the Affirming Committee. I am here to remind everybody that next Sunday, I believe it's at 1 o'clock, Dawn, correct me if I'm wrong, we are going, you're nodding that yes, I'm wrong, yes, I'm right. I think it's, 1 o'clock. We are going to be putting on the, oh my goodness, I got retail racism, yes. And actually, two of the speakers are two of my kids that have a formal human rights complaint that Human Rights have taken against a local grocery store for racial profiling. So you will come and learn how to, may not have happened to you directly, but you can come and learn what you can do to stand up for somebody else when you see this happening to them. So remember that. Come and learn. Come in here. And just come. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Brenda Baker, and in a little while I'll be back to tell you a little bit about the conference that we're putting on at the end of the month regarding disabilities. But for now, I just wondered if I could ask for some volunteers after the service to straighten up our chairs that are along this wall here. One of them is actually stacked in such a way that wheelchairs can't go through. So, in fact, as I see our situation right at the moment, I think there's one stack of chairs that's going to need to be moved before our special class can go downstairs. So we'll have to do that. So if you could meet me over by the chairs, we'll get those nice and straightened up. Partly, it's because the Saskatoon Symphony is sending representatives here tomorrow to check out our space for potential performances. And so we're not set up right now the way we typically would be for concerts, but I'd like to have everything as neat as possible for when we have these folks here. So thank you.
I'm not used to all this technology. Is the sound working?
Yes.
Is that okay? Okay.
Good morning, all, and welcome. I'm Margaret Woloshyn, Grosvenor Park United Church's Congregational leader for today. On behalf of myself, our congregation, the Reverend Wahkohtowin, and today's worship leader, the Reverend Ursula, Wiig. Welcome to you who join us in person and who are watching us on small and large screens in other places. Grosvenor Park United Church strongly recommends masking, although it is no longer mandatory for Sunday worship services. You will see on the screens that there will be asterisks at certain places, and that is an invitation to stand as you are able or to sit as the Spirit moves you. And when you see words in yellow, you are invited to speak together as a community. We will now move to the passing of the peace. Wahkohtowin, Fred, Shanti, Amani. Creator calls us to live in peace. Two-spirit, LGBTQIA+ and ally, seeking reconciliation as Treaty 6 people, as we gather on Treaty 6 land. Grateful for the stars that twinkle at night, the northern lights glowing colorfully, the world hunkered down, the people trying to keep warm. Grateful for all who are and do live on Treaty 6 land. Also in the traditional homeland of the Métis, gratefully naming specifically the non-treaty Dakota First Nations and La Prairie Ronde Métis. Knowing that our winter journey has companions and light to guide us to places of safety and comfort. The peace of Christ be with you.
Now, I have to confess that I don't know American Sign Languages, and my little brain can't remember all those things. So I'm wondering if someone can help with the signs. We're going to be saying in the light, does anyone want to help? Does some of you remember? Are you going to come up and help? Okay, come up. That's good. That's good. Okay. Oh, how does this work? have to press anything here? Really neat. Well, we're glad that the special class could join us today, so thank you. This was a nice surprise.
Lots of volunteers this morning.
And welcome to everyone who's here. Perhaps if some of you are new, you'd make yourself known if you feel comfortable doing that. And I want to say at this point too, the service usually has responses. Now it can be that sometimes you think, that response doesn't fit for me. So only make a response and as is fit for you. And when we come to the prayers of the people, we always say the Lord's Prayer or a version of it. Today it's going to be in a paraphrase. It's slightly different words. And I think they help us to see it in another way. But feel free to say it in whatever version or language that you know. So please, if you remember the actions, sign language, please participate. In the quiet of the dark days, we celebrate the light of Christ. In the warmth of the cup held between trembling fingers, we experience the light of Christ. I can see people, other people remember it. Good. In the witness to faith, joy, and wonder, we experience the light of Christ. In a flickering flame, no. In a flickering flame, we experience the light of Christ. We experience the light of Christ. We light this candle in prayer and thanksgiving. We experience the light of Christ. And we worship together. And we'll also, Margaret's also lit the affirming candle too. So we're going to sing, Arise, Your Light Has Come. The words are up there.
Arise, your light has come, the Spirit has come within. The glory of the Lord shines on you today. Arise, your light is come, come and come.
ready ourselves to be God's disciples.
Let us go and live out our discipleship, knowing that we are forgiven people. We are set free. Thanks be to God.
Jesus came bringing mercy. Jesus came bringing new life. Jesus came bringing honor. Hallelujah forevermore. Jesus came bringing mercy. Jesus came bringing new life. Jesus came bringing honor. Hallelujah forevermore.
Now, the theme of Epiphany and Matthew's story of the wise men is so rich that I couldn't resist carrying on the theme. This year, my sister-in-law sent me a text message with this Far Side cartoon about the fourth wise man. At the bottom it says, unbeknownst to most theologians, there was a fourth wise man who was turned away for bringing fruitcake. You've heard the discussions about who likes and doesn't like fruitcake. Clearly the Holy Family among the multitude who don't like fruitcake, Christmas cake. Personally, though, I think it's a very worthy gift. For some reason, the story of the Magi seems to inspire cartoonist Funny Bone. And if I was daring enough, I'd open the floor and you could relate yours. But here are a couple. And this is another one of the three wise men. We've got the gold and the myrrh, but what's that? And of course, as I'm sure many of you seen more recently, some of the funniest cartoons have featured wise or wiser women. This is one. And I can't read from here. Pardon? Yeah. And they're all bringing much more practical gifts. I should have printed this out. Can you go back, please? Fresh diapers, casseroles for a week, and lots of formula. Now, I've heard a version of that where instead of lots of formula, it says wine. And for those of us who like Maxine's cartoons, as usual, she has something to say about the three wise men. I've heard about there being, but I have a hard time believing about three wise men. One maybe, but not three. It's not only cartoonists that have been inspired by the story of wise men. This story, as indeed the whole Christmas story, has inspired the creativity of artists, poets, and storytellers throughout the ages. And the next picture is one of the classic picture. painted by Tissot, a Frenchman in the 19th century, I believe. And he, unlike some of the stylized paintings of the Renaissance and that, he actually visited the Palestine to get a better idea of the geography and the peoples. Today, we'll be reading a classic seasonal story inspired by Matthew's narrative, an updated version of Henry Van Dyke's The Story of the Other Wise Men, not the one who was turned away with his fruitcake. But first, let's consider the story of Matthew's own inspiration. In the Christmas season, we often conflate Matthew and Luke's versions of the birth of Christ, yet they're very different. In fact, the only similarities are the three main characters, Joseph, Mary, and Jesus, and the location of the birth, Bethlehem. So which version is true? Which can we believe? It's factual. Some scholars argue that the gospel authors use different sources. Matthew looked to Joseph's line and Luke at Mary's. But this isn't a very satisfactory explanation. Scholars have also tried to verify certain components historically, but with little success. Now we know Herod was a brutal man who would do anything to retain power. But there's no evidence that he ordered a massacre of the children, infants in Bethlehem. For a moment, let's think about how the Gospels were compiled. It's important to note that the infancy narratives were likely the last part to be composed, written. First, stories of Jesus' teachings, ministry, and death were assembled. That was the easy part. But what about the beginning? What about his birth, his conception, genealogy? He came from a humble background. No one was watching his birth. Why would they? Except the immediate people. And so scholars like Marcus Borg and Dominic Crossan proposed that the gospel writers made up extraordinary infancy narratives, as was the common practice for very important people in ancient times. Caesar, for example, was supposed to have had an immaculate conception. That was how they made it clear that he was an extraordinary person. Borg and Crossan liked these parables, narratives, to a parable, a thought-provoking story to illustrate a truth or a principle or the essence of someone. In the case of the infant narratives, they provide a prologue, a sort of snapshot of who they believed Jesus really was. An important theme for Matthew is God's revelation to the Gentiles. As Isaiah writes about in chapter 60, nations will come to your light and kings to the brightness of your dawn. And this theme is echoed in Psalm 72, two texts that we'll read passages from shortly. Matthew also sees Jesus as a new Moses, a leader who struggled for his people under an oppressive regime. Thus, Jesus, like Moses, as an infant, had to be saved from a brutal ruler. As a parable, Matthew's infancy narrative isn't a historical account. But for some of us who have trouble believing that they are historical, it does contain certain truths which have inspired people throughout the ages. It is, among other things, a story of a spiritual journey with all its struggles and joys. Now, Marlene will read the scriptures.
Ken, I'm assuming you're going to lead us in the sung response? Okay, thank you. So the first reading is Isaiah chapter 60, verses 1 through 6. Arise, shine, for your light has come. The glory of Yahweh is rising upon you. Though darkness still covers the earth and dense clouds enshroud the people, upon you Yahweh now dawns, and God's glory will be seen among you. The nations will come to your light, and the leaders to your bright dawn. Lift up your eyes and look around. They're all gathering and coming to you. Your daughters and your sons journey from afar, escorted to safety. You'll see them and beam with joy. Your heart will swell with pride. The riches of the sea will flow to you, and the wealth of the nations will come to you. Camel caravans will cover your roads. The dromedaries of Midian and Ephah, everyone in Sheba will come, bringing gold and incense and singing the praise of Yahweh. The second reading is Psalm 72, verses 1 through 3 and 10 through 14. There's a sung response which Ken will lead us in. And there are points in the psalm in which we would ask you to join in the text. Give the ruler thy justice, O God, and your righteousness to the royal heir. For judging your people rightly and upholding the poor with justice, that the mountains may bring forth peace for the people, and the hills prosperity with justice. May the rulers of Tarshish and of the isles pay tribute. May the monarchs of Sheba and Seba bring gifts. May all rulers do homage, and all nations render service. For your anointed shall deliver the needy when they cry, the poor and those who have no helper. Your anointed shall have pity on the weak and the needy, and save the lives of the poor. From oppression and violence your anointed shall redeem their life, and count as precious their blood. Hear what the Spirit is saying to the church. Thanks be to God.
Henry Van Dyke's story of the Otherwise Man was originally published in 1895 and soon became a classic hit Christmas story. The tale has been reprinted many times since and retold in a variety of media. You may have even seen movies about it, and there was even an opera. for earphones master. Van Dyck, who was a Presbyterian minister, diplomat, author, and educated, said of this story, "I do not know where this story came from. Out of the air, perhaps. One thing is certain. It is not written in any other book, nor is it to be found among the ancient lore of the East. And yet I've never felt as if it was my own. It was a gift, and it seemed to me as if I knew the giver." A century after this little book was first published, Susan Summers adapted and simplified the tale under the title, "The Greatest Gift, the Story of the Otherwise Man." Like Van Dyck, Summers identifies the main character, Artaban, along with his three colleagues, as followers of Zoroaster. Zoroastrianism is a monotheistic religion and one of the earliest organized religions in the world, which flourished in the Middle East, notably Persia, at the time of Jesus' birth. This doesn't work for me. It decreased in numbers with the invasion of the Arab peoples over that part of the world, and now it's estimated there are only about 100,000 Zoroastrians in the world today. But in the first century Common Era, anyone hearing Matthew's story would immediately recognize that the wise men from the East were Zoroastrians. An important aspect of Zoroastrianism was astrology. And for the wise men, the star represented the birth of a teacher with a universal message. Yeah. And that's one of the symbols of. So now, the greatest gift, the story of the other wise man. I wish I could show you these pictures, but copyright don't allow. But I'll leave the book at the back if you want to look at it. Retold by Susan Summers and illustrated by Jackie Morris. In the days when Augustus Caesar ruled the Roman Empire and King Herod reigned in Jerusalem, there lived in the city of Ecbatana, among the mountains of Persia, a man named Artaban. From the roof of his house, Artaban could look out over the rising battlements of black and white, crimson and blue, red and silver, to the hill where the emperor's palace glittered above the city of Ecbatana, like a jewel. High above the tallest trees in his wonderful garden stood a tower, and from its window a lamp often shone late in the night, for it was here that Artaban worked. He was a follower of the faith of Zoroaster, studying the eternal struggle between the forces of good and evil and exploring the secrets of nature, above all, the secrets of the night sky. Before dawn, even before the first bird had awoken, Artaban went down to the stable where Vazda, his favorite horse, stood saddled and bridled in her stall, shaking her bit and pawing at the ground impatiently. He swung himself into the saddle and was soon riding swiftly westwards. He had to reach the temple of the Seven Spheres on the appointed night, and the journey was long and hard. Artaban knew Vazda's strength and pushed forward, riding late into the night and starting long before sunrise every morning. Each evening, as soon as the sun sank behind the hills, the bright new stars shone down on him. Finally, after 10 days and 10 nights, he saw before him the great walls of Babylon. At last, in 3 hours' time, he would be at the temple of the Seven Spheres. As they trotted past a grove of date palms, Outside the city walls, Vasda started. She lowered her head and gave a soft whinny, then stood stock still, quivering in every muscle before the dark objects lying in the shadow. Artaban dismounted. In the dim starlight, he could see the figure of a man lying across the road. He leant down to touch the man's head. The man gave a ghostly sigh and clutched at his robe with long, bony fingers. Artaban's heart leapt into his throat. The man needed help, but how could he stop tonight of all nights? God of truth and purity, Artaban prayed, direct me in the holy path, the way of wisdom which you know better than any mortal. Then he fetched water, mixing it with some of the healing herbs which he always carried. He laid the sick man's head in the crook of his elbow and slowly poured the liquid into his parched mouth. Hour after hour he poured, a little at a time, then waited and poured again. At last the sick man's strength returned. "Who are you?" he asked. "And why have you brought me back my life?" "I am Artaban of the city of Ecbatana, and I'm going to Jerusalem in search of one who's been born King of the Jews. I dare not stay with you any longer, for the caravan that has been waiting for me may depart without me. But see, here all that I have left of bread and wine, and here is a potion of healing herbs." The sick man raised his hands solemnly to heaven. I must have missed a page. Okay. I did miss a page. Earlier, Artaban and his followers saw the star in the sky, so they immediately decided to go on this trip. I'm sorry. And at that point, Artaban sold his house and everything and bought 3 jewels, a sapphire, a ruby, and a pearl. So we'll carry on. So he has those with him. Just be careful. The sick man raised his trembling hands solemnly to heaven. "May the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob bless you and bring you peace. Now take heed. The Messiah will not be born in Jerusalem, but in Bethlehem of Judah. May the Lord bring you in safety to their place, because you've had pity on me and saved my life." It was already past midnight. Artaban rode quickly up the soft, silent plain to reach the place where he and his friends had arranged to meet, the Temple of the 7 Spears. But he could find no trace of his friends. Then by the edge of the terrace he saw a little cairn of bricks, and under them a piece of parchment. He caught it up and read, "We can delay no longer. We go to find the King of Kings." Artaban stared across the desert. "How can I reach Judah?" he asked himself, "with no food and a tired horse? I must return to Babylon, sell my sapphire and buy camels and food for the journey. I may never catch up with my friends. Only God knows whether I shall miss the King of Kings, because I stopped to help a dying man." So Artaban returned to Babylon, where he sold his glittering sapphire and his beloved horse Vasda in exchange for a caravan of camels. Then he set out across the dreary desert. Dark ledges of rocks rose up around him like the bones of ancient monsters. Shifting hills of treacherous sand skirted his route. By day, a fierce night blistered the earth so that no living thing could move. By night, jackals prowled and barked in the distance, and an icy chill fell over the dunes. But he pressed on, faithfully following the bright new star until, as the sick man had told him, It shone above the village of Bethlehem in the land of Judah. Artaban drew near the village full of hope. Now at last he could give his pearl and ruby to the king. But the streets were deserted. And he wondered whether the men had gone up to the hills pastures to bring down their sheep. Then from the open door of a stone cottage, he heard someone singing softly. He entered and found a young woman singing her baby to sleep. Yes, the woman told him. Oh, sorry. I'm all in. Thanks for help. Yes, the woman told him. 3 strangers from the street had appeared from the east had appeared a few days earlier. They had said the star had guided them to the place where a man, Joseph, was lodging with his wife and her newborn son. And they paid great reverence to the child and given him many gifts. But she said, she went on, the travelers have disappeared again. And they say that the man has fled to Egypt with his family. Now there seems to be a spell over the village. People even say that Roman soldiers are coming to enforce a new tax, and the men have driven our flocks and herds high up in the hills to escape it. Artaban listened to her gentle voice, and the baby reached up to touch his face. Suddenly there came a noise of wild confusion in the streets, a shrieking and wailing of women's voices, a clashing of swords and desperate cry, the soldiers of Herod, they're killing our children. The young woman's face went white with terror. Clutching her baby to her breast, she crouched in the darkest corner, covering him with her robe. Artaban strode to the doorway. The tip of his white cap almost touched the lintel. When the soldiers reached the cottage, Artaban summoned their captain and said, I'm alone here, and I will give you this jewel if you will leave me in peace. Then he showed the ruby glistening in his palm like a great drop of blood. The captain's eyes widened with greed, and he grabbed the jewel. March on, he cried. As the soldiers left, Artaban turned to the east and prayed. God of truth, forgive my lie. I've said the thing that is not, to save the life of a child. And now 2 of my gifts are gone. Shall I ever see the King of Kings? But from the shadows behind him came a woman's voice saying, because you have saved my little one, the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord let his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord give you peace, now and always. So Artaban left with the woman's blessing and made his way to Egypt, asking everywhere for news of the family from Bethlehem. He could find no trace of them. By now the star had vanished from the night sky, and he had no idea where to continue the search. So he went to a wise old Hebrew rabbi to seek advice. My son, said the rabbi, our scriptures foretold that the King of Kings would be despised and rejected by men. He will not be found in a palace, nor among the rich and powerful. If you seek him, look among the poor, the lowly, the sorrowful, and the sick. The years passed, and Artaban traveled on, always searching in the poorest places for the family from Bethlehem. He passed through towns where people were crying with hunger. He passed through cities where they were dying of plague. And though he found no King of Kings to worship, he found many to help. Wherever he went, he fed the hungry and clothed the naked. He healed the sick and visited those in prison. And so the years passed. From time to time, he would stop and take out his pearl, the last of his gifts, and as he gazed on it, he would wonder whether he'd ever meet the King of Kings. 33 years had passed since Artaban had first seen the star and set out on the journey. Now worn and weary, he traveled to Jerusalem to make one final stop. He arrived during the season of the Passover, and the city was thronged with people who had come for the feast. But this year, there was a strange sense of foreboding in the air. All around Artaban, sandals clattered and thousands of bare feet shuffled on the stones as the crowds were swept along to the Damascus road. "What's happening?" asked Artaban. "Haven't you heard?" replied a young man. "There's going to be a crucifixion. 2 robbers are to be crucified, and another man called Jesus of Nazareth. They say he has said and done many wonderful things, and everyone loves him greatly. But the priests and elders say he must be killed because he calls himself the Son of God." Then Artaban knew that this must be the King of Kings, for whom he'd been searching all these years. His heart thumped and his mind raced. Perhaps if he offered his pearl to the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate, he might save the man's life. He hurried towards the Damascus gate, but just beyond the entrance to the guardhouse, a troop of soldiers came down the street, dragging a young girl with torn dress and disheveled hair. As Artaban paused to look at her, she broke away from the hands of her tormentors and threw herself at his feet. "Have pity on me," she cried. "Save me. My father was a follower of Zoroaster, and I see from your dress that you are of the same faith. Now my father is dead, and I am to be sold as a slave to pay for his debts. Help me, please." Artaban looked on the girl and trembled. For a third time, he had to choose between keeping his jewel as a gift for the King of Kings or surrendering it to save a fellow human being. Yet he knew that to rescue this helpless girl would be a true deed of love. Artaban took his precious pearl from his pouch and he placed it in the girl's hand. "Here is your ransom, daughter. It is the last of the treasures I was keeping for the King of Kings, who is now to be crucified." And as he spoke, the sky grew black, and tremors ran through the street, which heaved like someone in place. Houses rocked, stones fell and crashed into the street. Dust clouds filled the air. The soldiers fled in terror, reeling like drunken men, and Artaban, the girl, took refuge beside the wall of the guardhouse. The earth gave one final shudder, and a heavy cloud loosened from the roof fell and struck Artaban on the temple. As the girl bent over him, fearing that the old man was dead, there came a voice through the darkness, very small and still, like music sounding from a distance. The voice said, "Peace be with you, Artaban. When I was hungry, you gave me food. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was in distress, you comforted me. As often as you did these things to the least of my children, you did them for me." A calm radiance lit up the face of Wahkohtowin, and a long, last sigh of relief left his lips. His journey was ended. At last, he had found his king.
Hello everyone, my name is Skylar Forsberg, and today I'll be talking about my group that I'm going to be hopefully starting at the end of January. At least 67% of gender/sexual diverse youth in Saskatchewan have attempted self-harm, and from that, bullying and discrimination against said youth is statistically higher in Saskatchewan, which is highest in all of Canada. I am looking to start a group for youth ages 12 to 18. While we have out Saskatoon, not everyone is comfortable going there. I am applying for grants to pay for honorariums for speakers and for refreshments. When youth have the support of their peers, organizations, and family, the percentage of self-harm drops to 7%. This in itself is a reason for our church to support youth in social justice. I believe that starting this group will help us with our Rainbow Connection and become more of a diverse group. Thank you so much. And if you need more information, hopefully I'll have more next Sunday, as I'm having a meeting tomorrow with Linda. Thank you so much.
There's a second Affirming Minute today. This has to do with the conference that's coming up at the end of January 27th to 29th, and I've been given a couple of minutes to bring you all up to speed on what's been going on with this conference, which we hope, since it's being hosted by Grosvenor Park United Church, that we'll have a good showing of Grosvenor members at the event. It takes place on the Friday evening of the 27th and all day Saturday on the 28th, and then the service on the 29th will also be connected to the theme, which is connecting communities, disabilities, justice, and living well. And I'm sure you've seen the posters around, and surely in the leaflet you've noticed that we've been promoting this event as well. Today I want to tell you a little bit about the speakers that you can expect to hear from, and also to request that folks who are coming would also provide us with a little bit of volunteer time in managing things like greeting people at the doors, registration table, hospitality, and so forth. I'll come back to that. First of all, our two keynote speakers are really amazing. Gary Tinker is coming here all the way from Pine House, 5.5-hour drive, just to speak to us on the Friday night about his experiences as a lifelong advocate of those with disabilities, especially in the north of Saskatchewan. He is someone who, at age 22, spent 79 days walking with crutches from La Ronge to Regina to raise awareness about the need for disability supports in the north. He has also met with every prime minister from Jean Chrétien to Justin Trudeau, as well as meeting with Queen Elizabeth II. So his reach is far and wide, and he has a really interesting story to tell, which will include some of his experience as someone affected by the 60s scoop and mental health challenges. So he'll speak for about a half an hour. And then that same evening, we're having an arts event which features two notable groups, the Notations, that you're familiar with because they practice here at Grosvenor. They'll perform, and also we're going to have some dances from the group called the Spirit Flyers. And these are folks who, like the Notations, are an integrated group of people with and without disabilities who are going to perform right here on our wonderful stage. We'll also hear from 3 writers who either write about disabilities or have disabilities and write about those. One of them is Adam Pottle, who is a deaf author, and he he writes in multiple genres, and he is actually going to appear by video for this event. We also have Elena Bentley and Bev Brenna. That's all on the Friday night, with a reception to follow. Our keynote speaker on Saturday, the name will be known to many of you, Ken Fredine. Margaret Fredine is still a member of our congregation, though she is very elderly now and doesn't come to church. All of her family were raised here in Grosvenor. And Ken is coming to us all the way from Toronto on his own nickel. He was General Counsel and Secretary to the Board of Deloitte from 2000 to 2020. And he's just recently retired. He is someone who's won a number of awards for his work, not only in the legal profession, but also because of all the work he has done on diversity and equity in corporate Canada. If you go to our website and take a look, you can see just the real reach that Ken has had, and he has a lot of interesting things to say about the state of employment for those with disabilities and how it's to our own detriment that we continue to exclude people with disabilities from the workforce and from corporate Canada. So he's got some really interesting things to say. We have panels through the day, as I said, on Saturday. 2 people from the university are going to be presenting a piece on sacred stories and the importance of our sharing of stories around disabilities to become better attuned to the needs of those with disabilities. We have Mariah Hillis, who is our disability consultant here at Grosvenor. She and Bev Brenna, writer and professor emeritus, Will Rogers, a young man who lives with autism and is working in the education system, and Randy Barker, who is on the faculty of the College of Education in the Department of Special Education. Those 4 people are going to be doing a panel on educating educators, the notion that we do not see enough of people with disabilities in all sectors of our education system. And then we have a panel on sport and power, and the sort of double-edged sword of, on the one hand, wanting people with disabilities to have opportunities to excel and be noticed, as in the Special Olympics, but at the same time wanting people with disabilities to be accepted even if they are not recognized as folks who have accomplished stuff. So that's going to be kind of an interesting discussion about you know, how we view one another and the importance we put in our society on being accomplished. For that panel, we have people from Special Olympics. We have someone who runs the equestrian therapeutic riding program here in Saskatoon. We have people from Special Olympics, including the person who runs the program and an athlete. And then finally, the last panel is on arts and accessibility. And in that particular panel, we have Jody Simpson-Liberty, who runs the Spirit Flyers. We'll have Tatiana Roulette and myself from Kids of Note and the Notations. We have also, we're hopefully having a poet who has disabilities joining us for that particular panel. And then finally, our special guest for Sunday will be Dr. Kathleen James Cavan, who herself has disabilities, and she's going to be giving the sermon and putting on the service on the Sunday morning. So I hope that just a few of those names have you know, piqued your interest, that you will come. We've extended the registration date so that the early bird registration ends this coming Friday, and it's $50 to come to the program for the early bird, and then the regular registration is $75, and we've extended that deadline to January 20th. So with that, I'll just say I'm going to put this sign-up sheet at the back. And if any of you who are coming could also help us out by volunteering a little bit, you can just sign up on this sheet. So thank you. Thank you very much for your time.
Our offering is a symbol of the ministry we offer. In gratitude for the gifts of life as we follow the star which shines and illuminates the ways of God, we give as we are able. We give because we feel that God calls us to make a difference in the world. We give as a sign that we want the world to be one of loving kindness and justice-seeking, where we cultivate disciples of followers of Jesus in wonder. Thanks be to God for all you have given. A box is at the back of the sanctuary for your offerings.
Grosvenor Park United Church, the prayers of the people are done by the people. For confidentiality concerns, these prayers are removed from the recording. Prayers can be shared at the GPUC family Facebook page, which requires permission to join, or are listed in the leaflet, GPUC's electronic communication. I'll begin by giving the Living Skies Regional Council prayer cycle. Today we are praying for Westview in Yorkton, Abbey, Lancer, Portreeve, as well as Abbey and Lancer, Asquith, Purdue, part of Purdue, and in the World Council of Churches Ecumenical Prayer Cycle, we are praying for Iran, Iraq, and Syria. Let us pray together in whatever words you wish. Loving Creator, we honor you, and we honor all that you have made. Renew the whole world in the image of your love. Give us what we need for today, and a hunger to see the whole world fed. Strengthen us for what lies ahead. Heal us from the hurts of the past. Give us courage to follow your call in this moment. For your love is the only power, the only home, the only honor we need in this world and in the world to come. Amen.
Let there be light, let there
I don't think I heard it announced, but next Sunday is the puzzle after church, puzzle exchange by sale. So bring your new used puzzles if you want before then. With the light of the stars to guide us, with the holy lives of community to strengthen us, the Holy One waits in the world for us to join in a journey of life. Let us go in deep gratitude and with the Creator's blessing. May the wonders of God's gift be deep within us. May the courage and grace of Jesus lead us to justice. May the life-giving presence of the Spirit draw us close and release us to love the world. Amen.